Go ahead. Come on. Good. Okay, Commissioners, we are live.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our June 30th, 2015 meeting. We had a few technical difficulties, so I'm sorry that we kept folks waiting, but we are now ready to proceed. And I will begin with the minutes from our public session for our last meeting on May 27th. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes from the public session? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to...
No. Sorry, I just have,
Wait, did someone from... Rini, were you saying something? I couldn't quite hear.
No, someone is trying to, Dan.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I just had one comment, which was, the notation that Commissioners Roth and Smalls were not present. And we weren't present for the approval of the minutes, but the way that it's written, it makes it seem like we weren't present for the entirety of the public session.
What page?
So I was wondering if we could just clarify that we were not present for the approval of the minutes on page 2 of the public.
We just say we're not present for the vote.
For the vote, for the approval of minutes.
Okay. Any other changes, comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
Wait, I think you need to bring that down here. Okay. No, that's okay. Commissioner Rowe.
All right, we have Commissioner Rosen. Letitia, I will turn it over to you for an update on a number of items.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. After our last meeting, we published on our website, and we've been soliciting comments on our proposed guidance regarding the scope of the definition of lobbying under the Lobbying Act. We've received many comments, especially in the last week, and we've engaged in many productive conversations. We'd like to continue the process. We've decided to extend the comment period to and through July 10th in order to give people more of an opportunity to comment. And we know the session went longer than anticipated, so we sent out an e-blast to that effect last week. With respect to training, I want to announce that we're offering a new training. It's for users of our online lobbying system. The training's been designed for the new users. We'll be offering that training tomorrow, July 1st, and again on July 9th. If anyone's interested in participating in that training, they can go to our website and sign up. I now want to turn to item number 4, regulations on our agenda, the outside activity regulations. These regulations, or proposed amended regulations, are before the Commission again today for your final approval. The proposed regulations would apply to officers and employees in the executive branch. I want to remind everyone of where we are procedurally with respect to these regulations. In March, the Commission voted to move forward and to proceed with a rulemaking process in accordance with the State Administrative Procedures Act. The regulations were published in the State Register in late April and subject to the 45-day public comment period, which ended on June 8th. Today, they're being presented again for your final approval. If they're adopted, they will go into effect when they're published in the State Register. We've received some comments pursuant to the 45-day public comment period. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Advice and Guidance, Rob Cohen, and he can generally describe for us the nature of the comments that we received.
So we received 5 or 6 comments, which is not surprising given that the proposed amendments don't fundamentally alter the existing regulations, which have been in place for nearly 25 years. The proposed amendments were designed to clarify existing practice, and additionally, they did make some, I think, relatively minor substantive changes to remind everybody of those changes. The regulations increased the threshold for JCOP approval of certain outside activities by policymakers from $4,000 in annual compensation to $5,000. The regulations also require that policymakers notify their agencies of any not-for-profit board service, even if it's uncompensated. Currently, there's no provision that requires such notification. And finally, the regulations require that if an individual who has received approval either from JCOP or the approving authority or the individual's agency, that individual notify his or her agency on an annual basis if the person is still continuing that outside activity. So those were the changes. The rest of the amendments, again, were really more for clarification purposes. Based on the comments we received, we are not proposing any substantive changes to the regulations, to the proposed amended regulations. Many of the comments we received were similar to those we had received during the informal public comment process that began several months ago, and the proposed regulations that were submitted to SAPA reflected many of those comments, or we had considered those comments and rejected them. So we present to you more or less what was presented to the Commission when the regulations were submitted for public comment pursuant to SAPA almost 2 months ago.
I would like to note that I had a conversation with Commissioner Weissman, and he's suggesting that we add to the regulations in your book on page 2 at 932.3 that we add substantially to modify conflicts in order to comport with the language in 74, the Public Officers Law, the Code of Ethics. So our proposal is that we add substantially before conflicts. And in our view, that would not constitute a material change.
Where is that, page 2?
It's on page 2 at tab B, Judge.
It's
Yeah.
part 932.3.
Okay, I'm getting there, LC, thank you.
You're-
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Part-time one.
So the second line, Judge, our recommendation is that we add substantially before conflicts. So this, the sentence would read, which interferes or substantially conflicts with the proper and effective discharge of such individuals' official state duties or responsibilities.
Any comments or questions?
Dan, I have one other question.
Sure, George.
A 932.10, which gives agencies the opportunity to have more restrictive guidelines regarding outside employment. Could an agency totally foreclose an outside activity under this language?
My understanding is they could and they have.
I think agencies, as the immediate employer, can adopt, more restrictive rules, different rules, and they could, whatever laws that might apply other than the ethics provisions would guide them in that, but they might have stricter rules about whatever activities their employees can engage in. So there may be other rules or contractual provisions that apply to whether or not they can do that, but in our view, there wouldn't be any public officers law prohibition.
Thank you.
So this is Dawn. It's substantially defined somewhere.
You mean, Dawn, are you referring to the language that LT mentioned a few minutes ago?
That's correct.
That's the statute.
It's not defined, but the word comes from, for everyone's reference, Public Officers Law, Section 74(2), and which says that you can engage in activities which are in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of his duties in the public interest, if you look at the end of Section 2.
So we're just matching it with the other.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Thank you.
Marvin?
Yeah, the more restrictive, that agencies are permitted more restrictive rules, it seems to me there ought to be a proviso that says any agency that adopts a more restrictive rule will not be able to impose approval upon the commission where otherwise this rule is not required. In other words, I wouldn't like to see an agency say, you got to get JCOPE permission, not only ours, or JCOPE approval. We promulgated a rule that says no approval necessary, and that would be the final word. You can restrict as you wish, but keep it internal.
If I could just speak to that briefly, Commissioner Jacobs, I completely understand where you're coming from. Just so you know, in practice, well, as an initial matter, this provision has been in the existing regulations for 25 years, and as a matter of practice, that is what JCOPE and its predecessor agencies have done. It very rarely happens because agencies are so familiar with the practice and the procedure that on very rare occasion we get an outside we get a request for approval where JCOPE is not statutorily or regulatorily obligated to provide approval. And it happens on a very rare occasion. We simply call the ethics officer and explain the situation, and it gets resolved. So I'm not entirely certain we need that language. It seems to be that
We've got enough to do on this staff.
It arguably can't hurt, but the existing practice is precisely how.
But as written, Robert, as written, they can ask for our approval if they require it. As written, if all it says is more restrictive can be required from an agency, that means they can require. I just want to interdict that.
Yeah, I'm just explaining to you what the practice has been. So
Plenty of work here.
Okay.
I also,
Well, they're putting in a proviso.
Yeah, well, I think we're doing
Monica, can I ask you a question as a matter of administrative law? I mean, why would we be bound under Marvin's fact pattern if an agency decides that they want to write a rule that's more restrictive than what the law and the regulations provide? Why would we be bound by another agency's internal determination that we should give blessing to what they want to do? I mean, I don't understand how we would be in a position how that would even be enforceable.
I'm not sure I understand the nature of the concern here. I don't see it to be an issue. It's very much understood that these are our rules. All the agencies have been operating under these rules for the last 25 years, and we're not really changing anything. So even if an agency adopted a rule that suggested that someone needs to seek permission from JCOPE under circumstances in which JCOPE has determined permission is not necessary, we would not be bound by that determination.
Okay, thank you.
They don't have oversight over us.
The rule, Monica, the rule is permissive on its face. On its face, it says it can be
I guess, to your concern, Commissioner Jacob, I would say that this is standard language. It's been in place for 25 years. It's in all of,
I'm
it's
very
in.
hung up on this. If you don't want to do it, don't do it, you know.
The staff is
going to be,
I was just gonna say that it's also in our other regulations, and, other agencies have used similar language in other circumstances, so I just don't know that the concern is in practicality, something that we have to address.
All right, any other comments or questions?
I had another one. On the annual notice.
It's
Sorry.
Dawn Smalls.
I can't see you go city, so I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Commissioner Smalls. With respect to the notice, the annual notice requirement, and I understand this is new, is that correct? That's the amendment? Is there a definition on notice, or is that prescribed somewhere of how you appropriately provide notice?
We intentionally left it to the decision, to the agency to determine how that notice should be provided. Some agencies will require thousands of people to give notice. Other agencies there might just be a handful. So it's up to the agencies to implement a process by which individuals can provide notice.
Because the way the language is written now, it says when, not how. So the way I read that was literally, which was just the time of year that that annual disclosure was to be made, not the form of notice. And so I understand the substantive goal of leaving discretion to the agency head, but I didn't necessarily get that from the written language of the regulation.
Dawn, what provision are you talking about?
I'm talking about 932.7 on page 4.
Thank
If you
you.
look- If you look at part B, the last sentence,
So, Commissioner Smalls, we actually, this issue came up and we discussed it at the meeting, I believe it was in March, where we talked about whether or not JCOPE should sort of formalize and standardize a process among the various agencies. At that point, the commission decided to, proceed with the regs as they are for many of the reasons that Director Cohen mentioned, which is, there's a lot of variety among the agencies in their time schedules and in the way that they operate, in their size. And so we did not think that JCOPE needed to impose a one-size-fits-all on the procedures that they adopt in accordance with these regs. It's very similar to some of the other regulations that we have where we put processes in place where we say that agencies need to have an approval process for certain activities, but we don't really dictate the form of the notice and the process. We just give them guidance on what they should be considering.
I guess I'm not disputing that, and I'm not disagreeing with the purpose or the substance of everything you just laid out. I'm just, my only quibble is with actually the language of how the regulation is written.
Oh, okay.
If we amend it
To me, what I'm saying is on the face of the language, the only thing that you are leaving up to the discretion is the when. So
Oh.
time of year of the notice and not form of notice.
So would it satisfy? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, would it satisfy, I think I now understand what you're saying, if we amended 932.7B to say at the very end, shall determine when and how such annual disclosure is to be made?
That's correct.
Okay, and I don't think that would be a material change to the regulation, so if the commission proceeds today, I don't think that we would need to put it out for another comment period for that change. I think it's along with the spirit of what was intended, and I think the agencies understand that. So when and how, so that would be a change to 932.7B.
Timing matter.
Leon Russell,
when, how, time, and manner.
song for you.
If you prefer time and manner,
I don't know, I just, sounds,
Time and manner is fine. I mean,
Time and
that
manner,
sounds
okay.
more
Time and
formal
manner.
and appropriate for a regulation than when and how. Correct.
Time and manner.
All right.
All right. Any other comments or questions? If,
This is Commissioner Smalls. I guess I would just ask what the since there were only 5 or 6 comments, what they were.
Well, there were 5 or 6 commenters, entities that commented.
But they commented on.
They commented on a variety of different things. 2 of the agencies I don't want to mention because I actually don't want to embarrass them, where comments were premised on a fundamental misunderstanding of the existing regulations and the proposed regulations. We are going to be speaking with those agencies to make sure that they understand what the purpose of the outside activity regulations has been for the last 25 years. Those comments were disregarded because they just weren't premised on a concrete understanding. The other comments ranged from, asking for a definition of outside activity or a clarification on some terms like what public office is. One entity thought that JCOPE should have less oversight with respect to outside activities and that the threshold for approval and the alternative should be raised to $30,000 a year in compensation. We rejected all those comments as you know, we rejected all those comments for a number of reasons. First of all, we didn't want to lessen JCOB's oversight, but also the existing structure has worked very well for the last 25 years. There has not been a widespread confusion over what outside activity means, over what public office means, or what some of the other defined terms mean. So there was no need to fix what was not broken. There were there was one other comment that had expressed some confusion over the inclusion of it is 932.6A2. It says the interpretations of the approving authority of the public officers law shall not be binding on the commission. A couple commenters questioned whether that gave an individual a right to appeal to JCOB for an adverse decision. So there are some. Let me back up for a little bit. There are some types of outside activity only require agency approval and do not require JCOB approval. So some entities thought that 932.6A2 might give those individuals who only require agency approval the ability to appeal an adverse decision to JCOB. That is not how the regulations work. That was not ever intended.
Yeah.
So we excised that language. We removed that language. It wasn't necessary in the first place. We put it in as a clarification, and the clarification only made things a little more confusing. So it was that's the one change we made, non-substantive, from the based on the regulations. Based on the comments, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions? I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the regulations with the two changes we discussed today in final form.
So moved.
Second?
Was that Marvin?
Second.
Okay, that was Rini. All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
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 There's Mike. Lost him. Okay. So we need to,
Lori?
okay, we just need to get,
We don't, we have it,
we want him to, yes, okay. Any opposed, say no. All right, the motion is approved. The regulations are adopted in final form. Unless there's any new or other business, I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Executive Law, Section 9419B.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. We will now go into executive session. When we complete our business in executive session, we will return to public meeting, and to the extent we are permitted by law, we'll make an announcement of the actions that were taken in executive session.
I think that they were reading, he's back in
Commissioners, we are back in public session.
All right. During the executive session, the commission discussed certain investigative matters. The commission approved the substantial basis investigation settlement. The commission commenced certain substantial basis investigations. The commission closed the substantial basis, pardon me, we closed an investigation. It's not a substantial basis investigation. And finally, the commission approved an application for an exemption to Public Officers Law 73, Section 8-B. Unless there is any other business before the commission, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, we stand in adjournment. We will see everybody on August 4th. Thank you, everybody.
When are you leaving?